The Taiwan Strait at 2:07 p.m. looked, to anyone not watching closely, like 43 contacts on a busy shipping lane. Merchant vessels on established corridors, distant container ships heading south toward the South China Sea, a scatter of fishing returns near the Fujian coastline to the west. The CIC watch officer had logged each contact, classified each one, and found nothing beyond routine. The Taiwan Strait in the afternoon was always a crowded picture, and threats in this waterway did not announce themselves dramatically. They arrived as small deviations from expected behavior. They arrived as 8-degree turns. At 2:07 p.m., 2 contacts changed, not in position, in behavior. 2 surface contacts, previously classified as plan warships on a standard parallel track, proceeding south at 14 knots in the same direction as the destroyer, simultaneously adjusted course. Not by much, not enough to trigger an automated alert. Each turned 8 degrees toward the destroyer's track. The combined effect of those 2 corrections, multiplied across the nautical miles separating them from the U.S. ship, was a geometry the CIC tactical officer recognized before he had consciously processed it. He looked at the display for 3 seconds, re-ran the vector projection, and confirmed what the display was telling him. The 2 planned contacts were no longer proceeding in parallel. They were converging. He pressed the intercom. Bridge CIC. 2 planned contacts altering course C. Contact Alpha, bearing 285, range 4.2 nautical miles. Contact Bravo, bearing 092, range 3.8 nautical miles. Both contacts adjusted course toward our track. CPA estimates: Alpha, 1,900 yards, time 11 minutes. Bravo, 2,100 yards, time 12 minutes. Convergence is bilateral. Bilateral. 1 ship closing from one bearing was a single threat. 2 ships closing from opposite bearings simultaneously was a geometry. And geometries in the Taiwan Strait had specific purposes that every officer in the CIC understood the moment the word bilateral left the tactical officer's mouth. The destroyer was in the eastern corridor of the traffic separation scheme, closest to Taiwan's coastline. The planned contacts were on the western side, between the ship and the Chinese mainland. They had appeared, until 60 seconds ago, to be conducting their own southbound transit. They were no longer doing that. At 2:09 p.m., the captain stepped onto the bridge. He walked directly to the radar display and studied the 2 contacts for 20 seconds. Then, the chart table. Position confirmed, distances to the traffic separation boundaries on each side noted, CPA projections for both contacts reviewed. He did the arithmetic once. He did not do it again. He turned to the officer of the deck. "I have the con." His voice carried no elevation. The destroyer was $2.1 billion of American presence in the most politically contested waterway in the Western Pacific. The United States had maintained consistent Taiwan Strait transits on the basis that the channel's central corridor constituted international waters under UNCLOS. China disputed this with increasing frequency and increasing tonnage. The plan had been conducting what their doctrine called monitoring operations against U.S. transits for years, each cycle pushing the envelope a degree further, each encounter testing the response. The pattern was documented, analyzed, and anticipated. Tonight, monitoring had become something with a different name. CPA updated: Alpha, 1,700 yards. Bravo, 1,900 yards. A 3rd contact appeared at 2:11 p.m. Not from east or west, from ahead. Bridge CIC. New contact bearing 002, range 5.1 nautical miles. China Coast Guard vessel type 054, displacement estimate 12,000 tons. Proceeding south, same track as us, at 8 knots. Speed decreasing, 8 knots and decreasing. The destroyer was at 15 knots. The forward contact would reach CPA within approximately 9 minutes, within the same window as both flanking plan contacts. All 3 arrivals within 90 seconds of each other. This was not coincidence. This was a schedule. Someone had calculated the intercept geometries, established a timeline, and dispatched 3 vessels to arrive at their positions within 90 seconds of each other. The CCG vessel displaced 12,000 tons, heavier than the destroyer by nearly 3,000 tons, and it occupied the forward position on the track, decelerating. The geometry was a closing box. To port, a planned destroyer; to starboard, a planned destroyer; ahead, a 12,000-ton Coast Guard vessel becoming stationary in the lane. Alter course in any direction and close the distance to one of the flanking contacts. Hold course and approach a contact approaching stasis. The box was not yet closed. The lid was descending. CPA updated. Alpha, 1,500 yards. Bravo, 1,700 yards. Forward. CCG, range 4.2 nautical miles, speed 6 knots. Bridge CIC. CCG contact has initiated a broadcast on Channel 16. The voice through the bridge speaker was calm, formal, and clearly from a prepared text. Mandarin first, then English. The destroyer was transiting waters over which the People's Republic of China exercised sovereignty. The transit was unauthorized. The U.S. vessel should alter course immediately. The broadcast ran 1 minute and 40 seconds. Then it repeated. The officer of the deck looked at the captain. The captain was looking at the radar display. He did not reach for the radio. He did not respond on Channel 16. He did not appear to have registered the broadcast as anything beyond ambient data to be filed alongside the wind speed and the current. The bridge was quiet. Through the forward windows, the Taiwan Strait in afternoon light was flat and brilliant, deep blue at the southern horizon, almost purple in the full sun close in, the haze line between sea and sky sharp and still. The CCG vessel was visible to the naked eye now. A large white hull with red-blue striping, prominent and official-looking, growing larger with each minute. 4,000 yards ahead and still decelerating. The combined replacement value of the 3 adversary vessels surrounding the destroyer was approximately $2.8 billion. The plan had committed that hardware, plus the fuel and coordination required for a 3-vessel intercept, to test whether one American captain would adjust his course in a 130-kilometer strait. A single course alteration, filmed and logged, would become the precedent Chinese planners cited at every subsequent briefing. It would become the number they used when arguing that U.S. transit lines had movable edges. Channel 16, Cycle 3. The ventilation hum. A coffee cup vibrating faintly against the lip of the chart table. The bow indicator clicking at 3-second intervals. CPA updated. Alpha, 1,200 yards. Bravo, 1,400 yards. Forward CCG, range 3,400 yards, speed 4 knots. The first friction event arrived without announcement at 2:13 p.m. Contact Alpha switched off its AIS transponder. 30 seconds later, Bravo went dark. Then the CCG vessel ahead, AIS off at 2:14:32 p.m. All 3 contacts within 90 seconds of each other. The radar still held every track, but the formal identification data had ceased to exist in the official record. With all 3 military contacts AIS suppressed, the 40-plus commercial vessels in the broader picture could not distinguish them from general traffic. For commercial masters watching their own navigation systems, the plan and CCG contacts had vanished into the background. The framing was deliberate. To any outside observer, the scene appeared to be a U.S. warship maneuvering aggressively in a lane crowded with civilian shipping. The record was being shaped as it was being made. The captain had not spoken since taking the con. He stood at the center window, reading the whole picture in rotation. Radar repeater, FLIR monitor, bridge windows forward, starboard side, back to radar. The planned destroyer to the east, contact Bravo, was visible through the starboard glass at 1,400 yards, a Type 052D, angular and modern, its smooth profile cutting through the bright water. 3/4 of a nautical mile in open ocean was comfortable passing distance. In the traffic separation lanes, with commercial vessels on all outer bearings, it was constraint. To port, the mirror image at 1,200 yards. Ahead, a white hull approaching stillness. He had already identified the one variable the adversary's geometry had been built around. He was not ready to change it yet. He had already decided when he would change it. He was waiting for the geometry to arrive at the moment where the change would be most legible and least reversible. The ozone smell of electronics under sustained load had layered into the recycled air of the CIC. cooling fans at steady frequency. The radar drive pulsed. The electronic chart updated contact positions at 4-second intervals. The engines held at the specific RPM for maneuvering readiness, a fuel-inefficient setting not designed for extended transit, burning reserve at a rate that would require a schedule adjustment necessary for the geometry the next few minutes would require. CPA updated. Alpha, 1,100 yards. Bravo, 1,200 yards. Forward. CCG, range 2,800 yards. Speed, negligible. Channel 16, cycle 7. The broadcast had been running for 9 minutes. It existed for the archive. Both sides understood this. It would appear in subsequent accounts as evidence that proper notification had been given. It was not designed to change what happened in the next 10 minutes. It was designed to exist in the record afterward, which was a different objective and served a different master. The captain stood at the center window and had not sat down since taking the con, had not leaned on anything, had not made any physical gesture expressing the weight of what his crew was managing through practiced stillness. He was looking at the CCG vessel through the glass. The hull was large enough now that the bridge windows of the CCG ship were visible as dark rectangles above the main deck. Crew members on its bridge wings were watching the approaching U.S. ship with the steady attention of people who had rehearsed for this. He had been watching the CCG vessel for 8 minutes. He was not watching it to find a reason to act. He had already decided to act. He was waiting for the moment within the countdown where the action had maximum clarity. He had done the math before the third contact appeared. He had done it before he walked onto the bridge. 29 years of sea time did not make the math faster. It made the math unnecessary. The answer was already there when he looked at the display. He was simply waiting for the geometry to reach the moment the answer required. At 2:19 p.m., that moment arrived. All ahead full. Come to 22 knots. The helmsman acknowledged and advanced the throttle controls. The 2 gas turbines responded with a change in deck vibration that arrived through the soles of the feet before it registered as sound, a deepening of the frequency, a new urgency in the engine note that was felt before it was heard. The ship began to accelerate. Steadily, deliberately, the bow lifting almost imperceptibly as the hull moved toward its operational speed. The geometry of the box had been calculated for 15 knots. The captain had changed the variable. At 22 knots, the 2,800 yards of forward distance to the CCG contact compressed to 0 in approximately 2 minutes and 35 seconds. The CCG vessel was making negligible speed. To maintain the blocking position, it would have to accept the closing approach of 9,200 tons at 22 knots in a commercial shipping lane. A confrontation neither its captain nor its command had authorization to complete. To clear the lane, it would have to accelerate forward and surrender the position 11 minutes in the making. Neither planned destroyer on the flanks could safely match the acceleration. At 1,100 and 1,200 yards in the confined lanes, a sprint to 22 knots required maneuvering space those ships did not have without entering the commercial traffic corridors or closing the lateral gap beyond safe limits. The box had been engineered at 15 knots. The captain had declined to remain at 15 knots. The Seahawk launched at 2:20 p.m., banked north, and began an overflight of the CCG contact at 200 feet with its camera system oriented at the ship's superstructure. The CCG crew could see the camera. They understood what was being recorded and who would have access to the recording. The Seahawk was a witness that could not be silenced by switching off a transponder or composing a prepared broadcast. Fire control radar entered active tracking mode on both planned contacts simultaneously. 2 targeting solutions, computed and current. Neither contact illuminated, tracking mode, not designation. The distinction was precise. Tracking meant the solution existed and was being maintained. Every electronic warfare suite on both planned destroyers was receiving the emissions. Every officer with threat assessment training on both bridges understood what those emissions encoded. They were inside a targeting solution. The decision about what happened next belonged to the ship generating it. No weapons were authorized. No weapons were released. Fire control radar was a language spoken in the electromagnetic spectrum, and this language did not permit misunderstanding. The CIWS entered passive thermal tracking mode on contact alpha. No firing authorization. The barrel tracked. As Alpha shifted, the barrel shifted, slowly, the patient movement of a system that experienced nothing. The barrel was visible from the planned destroyer's bridge. Every crew member on that bridge who had been trained to recognize a CIWS in tracking mode understood what they were looking at. CPA updated: Alpha 1,050 yards. Bravo 1,150 yards. Forward CCG contact range 1,900 yards and compressing. The helmsman was 26 years old. He had been on his current watch for 4 hours and 40 minutes. His hands were at 10 and 2, the position trained into them until it had become their natural resting state. To port, 1,050 yards, a Type 052D warship matching his speed and bearing with mechanical precision. To starboard, 1,150 yards, its mirror image. Ahead through the forward glass, a 12,000-ton white hull filling more of the window with each passing minute. The course was 018. The standing order was 018. Everything accumulated in 4 years of sea duty was calibrated to hold that heading against current, sea state, and wind, not against the sustained pressure of steel closing simultaneously from 3 directions. That kind of pressure had a different register, a different language, spoken below the level where training lived. His hands were at 10 and 2. They had not moved from that position. Course 018. The course stayed. The second friction event arrived at 2:22 p.m. The CIC watch rotation had been scheduled for 2:15 p.m., 7 minutes overdue. The relief officer had been briefed and was at the hatchway. He had not been in this picture from the beginning. Briefing was not 4 continuous hours of context. It was a summary, delivered under time pressure, describing a situation that had been evolving continuously since before the summary began. The current watch officer was past his rotation, had not eaten since beginning the watch, and had been at sustained high alert. Fatigue does not announce itself. It accumulates in the gap between perception and response, invisible from the outside, uncertain from within. The captain made the call without being asked. Hold the watch rotation. Senior watch officer retains CIC until I authorize relief. Continuity in the CIC was worth the cost. The next 12 minutes would determine whether that cost had to be paid at all. Range to CCG forward contact 1,400 yards. At 22 knots combined rate, 77 seconds. At 2:23 p.m., contact Alpha reduced speed by 0.8 knots, less than 1 knot. Invisible to casual observation. Visible in the track's speed data field to someone watching that field carefully. The CIC tactical officer caught it on the first sweep, confirming the change, watched through a second sweep, and glanced toward the bridge repeater. The captain was already watching the Alpha track. He had seen it. He said nothing. The crew did not relax. Alpha had not blinked. Not yet, not officially. But the physics of 0.8 knots were in the data now, and the captain knew what they meant. Someone on that bridge had pulled back, which meant someone on that bridge was reassessing whether being at 1,000 yards when the U.S. ship hit 22 knots was actually the position they wanted to hold. The captain filed the information. He waited. Range to CCG forward contact, 900 yards. Then the display shifted. The CCG vessel's speed readout changed, from negligible to 2.4 knots, then 4, then 8. Accelerating forward, south, in its original direction of travel. The account this provided was defensible, routine resumption of speed after a navigational pause. The framing would not survive serious analysis. It would survive a government broadcast. The CCG captain was providing his command with something that could be transmitted without conceding the withdrawal that was actually occurring. Forward contact accelerating. Speed 9 knots and increasing. CPA opening. Contact is clearing the lane. Channel 16 went silent at 2:24 p.m. No final broadcast. No acknowledgement. After 15 minutes of continuous transmission, the empty frequency arrived without warning, and in the context of what had been broadcasting, it was loud. The bridge crew registered it. No one commented. At 2:25 p.m., Contact Alpha adjusted course 4 degrees to port. 4 degrees. The smallest course change that reads unambiguously as intentional on a radar track. In 20 minutes at that divergence rate, Alpha would be 1,400 yards further west than a parallel course would have placed it. The CIC track history showed the bearing line diverging from its former parallel for the first time since 2:07 p.m. Contact Alpha altering course. Bearing drift to port 4 degrees. CPA opening. Projecting 1,200 yards and increasing. 23 seconds later. Contact Bravo altering course. Starboard drift. CPA opening. Projecting 1,400 yards. The box was open. The CCG contact was 3 nautical miles ahead and pulling away. Channel 16 was empty. The formation that had spent 21 minutes building and tightening a 3-sided enclosure around a U.S. destroyer was now, quietly, professionally, reversing that enclosure. No radio call, no acknowledgement, the withdrawal conducted entirely in the language of course, changes and speed adjustments, visible only to the people watching the display with the attention their profession required. At 2:26 p.m., the CPA numbers were increasing for the first time since 2:07 p.m. Alpha, 1,350 yards and climbing. Bravo, 1,500 yards and climbing. The destroyer reduced to 15 knots. The gas turbines had run at full power for 7 minutes. The fuel consumption would require an adjustment to the patrol schedule, a real cost, logged, appearing in the engineering report as a departure from standard transit economics. The cost of holding a lane in the Taiwan Strait was a line item. It was a manageable line item. It had been worth every liter. The Seahawk recovered at 2:27 p.m. Fire control radar to standby. CIWS secured. The captain stood at the center window for 2 minutes after the formation opened past 3,000 yards. Not verifying, he had already verified. Witnessing. When both contacts were past threshold and the numbers were still climbing, he turned. Resume standard watch rotation. Incident report per 7th Fleet Protocol. Fuel consumption log to engineering. Chart table. Position confirmed. Taiwan's coastline visible through the starboard windows as a low dark line at the horizon. Present, unchanged, still there. Good watch? That was all. No one cheered. The boatswain's mate at the port bridge wing hatch became aware, for the first time in 22 minutes, that he had been standing with his weight distributed squarely on both feet, the stance of someone bracing without knowing they are bracing. He shifted his weight to one foot. The shift felt unfamiliar. He had not known, until the moment of releasing it, how much he had been holding. The officer of the deck straightened his collar. It had not needed straightening. He straightened it anyway, and the small automatic gesture of returning to a normal posture was the most human thing that had happened on the bridge in the past 22 minutes. Someone poured coffee. The sound of liquid hitting the inside of the mug was the loudest thing on the bridge. The record assembled here speaks in the language the ocean keeps. 3 People's Republic of China vessels, 2 planned Type 052D guided missile destroyers, and 1 China Coast Guard cutter displacing 12,000 tons, established a coordinated 3-point enclosure around a U.S. destroyer conducting a lawful Taiwan Strait transit at 2:07 p.m. AIS suppressed across all 3 contacts simultaneously at 2:13 p.m. Channel 16 Sovereignty broadcasts 15 minutes of continuous transmission. Responses from the U.S. vessel, 0. Time elapsed from first contact behavior change to final adversary withdrawal, 21 minutes. Combined replacement value of adversary formation, $2.8 billion. Estimated fuel cost of 3 vessel operation, $55,000. Speed increase executed by U.S. destroyer to break forward geometry, 15 to 22 knots. Fire control radar activated, yes. Weapons authorized, no. Weapons released, no. Seahawk overflight of CCG forward contact, yes. Duration, 6 minutes. Closest point of approach, Western planned contact, 1,000 yards. Eastern planned contact, 1,050 yards. Forward CCG contact, 890 yards. Course alterations made by U.S. destroyer, 0. Speed reductions under adversary pressure, 0. Degrees yielded from course 018, 0. The Taiwan Strait is 130 kilometers wide. The destroyer used none of that width to accommodate a 3-vessel formation, 15 minutes of broadcast, and a geometry built by professionals who had been running this calculation for years. It held the lane, changed one variable at the moment the geometry required it, and let the arithmetic do the rest. 3 ships, $2.8 billion, 21 minutes. The formation came to move a wheel. The wheel did not move. The strait is still open. The answer is on record.